I guess I just wanted to talk with you today about the idea of this global war on terror being everywhere. You go outside, it's a nice day, there's birds out, but it's the war on terror. You go into your kitchen and, you open it up, there's a loaf of bread cooking, but that's the war on terror. Like, that is an unauthorized war zone in there. What kind of world are we living in where that's the case?
I was really surprised by everyone had a very unique reading of the speech. And some people, like I read both conservatives and liberals, like liberals, not necessarily anyone on the left.
Thanks for making that distinction.
Well, I think it's important because we obviously both think it's important, but I read people read it as a declaration of the end of this war on terror, and what I heard was, we're gonna do all the same things, we're gonna do all the same things. We're going to acknowledge that it's absurd that we're doing all of the same things. We're going to acknowledge that it's problematic that we're doing all of the same things. We're gonna make the same hollow calls for the sort of just things that we said we were going to do when we came into to office, but we're going to be waging the same exact war, be as vague about what those targets are, not be transparent about those things, and it didn't put me at ease at all. It actually made it more confusing. It was like when we drew down combat troops in Iraq, and people were like, "Well, we're out of Iraq," and it's like, "No, we're still employing paramilitary forces to occupy the area, and it's even more lawless now that we don't have to have troops there." And so I see people online celebrating this as progress, and I just see it as a realignment of language.
Absolutely. And that was the thing that I got out of the speech too, is it was this it was like Prozac for liberals. Just like he said all of the right things, but the content of what he was actually saying, it's like, we're not always going to be able to stop every terrorist, and it's absurd that we should think that we can, but drone striking, assassinating United States citizens abroad without regard to national laws of countries that we're acting in, that's legal for whatever reason, even though it seemed like he was speaking out against the policies that liberals as well are opposed to. It was just this reconsolidation of power, but in with like some nice ribbons on it of flowery speech.
Well, it became really clear to me that the only thing that matters to liberals is talk. That it's like, well, he said he's not going to. It's like, well, fucking A, he said he was going to close Guantanamo the second that he got into office, and has pretended as if that's out of his hands, as if he's not the president of the United States, who's able to. And I've said this before in our conversations, and I'm befuddled when people pretend as if he's been completely neutered. And he's unable to use any channel of communication that they put a call through to that puts him in front of the American people and says, we've for indefinite time detained people, hundreds of people, for a dozen years, and there's a refusal to do anything about it, and history is going, and he said history is, if we don't take action, history is going to look back poorly on us. We essentially have internment camps. These things people pretend are a thing of the past, up and functioning for over a decade. History's fucking judged us. And I'm supposed to applaud the fact that this is being acknowledged 5 years in, to, 4 years in, to a man who campaigned on acknowledging all of these things,
right,
and saying he was going to do something about it. So, and that sparked for me an additional annoyance when Medea of Code Pink, quote unquote, heckled the president,
right,
and people went through this action about saying, maybe she's bringing up some good points, but you're not supposed. Well, if he had done the things that he said he was going to do 4 years ago, that everyone, has internalized, well, he can't actually, well, not everyone, but people who are still even begrudging supporters of the president, if he'd done the things that he said that he was going to do, maybe there would be no need for someone getting in on the speech and yelling at him for the things that he's done, and we have no proof isn't going to continue to do. Actually, it was pretty strongly implied that it's going to continue exactly the same way as it has. There was never any directive language used about how it would change. There were suggestions. If you recall the way that the president handled the gun control conversation after Newtown, there were a number of suggestions that people freaked out. People, sort of dogmatic gun rights supporters freaked out about that. He made 23 executive order suggestions. Well, what's happened with those suggestions? Nothing. So he made an hour-long list of suggestions, implications, nothing direct yesterday, and I'm supposed to cheer this? No, I cheer the woman who went in there and who yelled at him and brought up these things that he's trying to hide by using this flowery language, and reminded people that we've done really bad things.
Yeah, I have to applaud Medea Benjamin for doing what she does. And the thing is, too, like, people treat her as though, like, she's gone in, I don't know, like the nuns who recently, well, not recently, a few years ago, recently went to trial for it, broke into a nuclear missile silo and chained themselves to stuff. They were doing... They were participating in a more belligerent act than Medea Benjamin, who simply got up and yelled the truth that, hey, you're the executive commander of the military in the United States. You can with a pen stroke, you can just say Guantanamo closed, and then just set those guys free, send them back to their countries or whatever, or maybe give them some reparations because they've been locked in a glorified porta potty for 12 years.
Killed a kid.
Yeah.
It reminded that one of the people who died in this is a child. When she was talking about that, and it's not like those, and the president's brilliantly charismatic and said, we should listen to this woman, but he didn't mean it. Like, it's not like he was saying, well, here's a list of the people that we've assassinated, and here's what those conditions actually look like. He did indicate, and I will applaud this indication because it rarely ever gets acknowledged, that in these clean attacks we're taking out civilians and citizens, and we know this. But it was all this grandiose reimagining of what things have been and what things could be without naming any of the specifics. And Medea Benjamin yelled about the specifics and reminded people about what this looks like on the ground. It's not about rhetoric and flowery language. It's about people who've actually lost their lives. It's about, I don't care where frankly, in other circumstances, like, if someone is, in some of these conditions you have American citizens who, yes, are actually doing relatively abhorrent things. I'm not going to suggest as if those who've been assassinated in these strikes aren't engaging in something that I disagree with. I mean, I completely disagree with these actions. At the same time, the fact that I've seen people on Facebook who are who identify as left or liberal, say, well, these people are calling for the deaths of American citizens. Then arrest them. If we have the jurisdiction to do so, then put them on trial. Then don't put them in indefinite detention and kill them.
Anwar al-Awlaki, he was, a ringleader and did inspire people or whatever. But so, does that even fit within our any legal definition for a crime? I put YouTube videos on the internet. That's essentially what Anwar al-Awlaki was guilty of, is putting up screeds, and they're hateful screeds. Don't get me wrong. Like, was a very hateful, despicable person, but putting up ideas, is that a crime? Like, even if they are hateful?
And that's what I'm ultimately driving at is, if it is, what you do in those situations is you pursue legal methods, and if you're wrong, we reset the precedent that underscores the fact that, or if we're wrong and the United States is wrong, we underscore underscore precedents that show that what's being spoken of isn't even worthy of trial, let alone assassination. But we forego the overall issue that got overlooked in this what in its delivery and sort of its performance was a good speech. In its substance, it was a completely hollow. What gets overlooked is the fact that whether or not we're going in one direction or another, the one direction that we're positive that we're going in is one in which we've cheered on eliminating any legal processes in exchange for assassination. And I guess it's happening so progressively and so quietly and being handled so gingerly from a rhetorical standpoint that people have internalized it as just fine. He was only, and for whatever reason, the idea of precedent isn't huge in these grandiose political conversations that happen online, and I use grandiose tongue-in-cheek because, for whatever reason, people can't draw a parallel between, yes, he was doing things that I consider to be horrible, yet no, it didn't deserve assassination. And even if I don't care about this particular person, even if I'm happy he's dead because of the things because of sort of the biases and prejudices that I personally hold, a precedent has been set in which if at some point somebody doesn't like the things that I am saying, I can be killed. Right. And that for me is the despicable thing. And it's I can't even believe, and I've certainly come a long way on believing these things in the past 4 years. I've been able to give more of a benefit of the doubt than I'd ever give now, but I can't believe what's considered to be a conversation of the left in what happens publicly. I can't believe that Obama, by his critics and his allies, are considered to be on the left. As far as I'm concerned, a leftist would never say any of these things. It would be a false leftism, and it is. And he's been completely packaged in this way. For two dueling purposes. One, so that people who are only slightly farther right of where you and I stand support it, and people farther right of where those people stand abhor it.
We're trapped in the belly of this horrible machine, and the machine is bleeding to death.